We're here at the 2024 Budapest Forum, and with me now is Roland Freudenstein, Director at the Free Russia Foundation Office in Brussels. Thank you for your time.
Pleasure, Aaron.
So tell me, Roland, Russia's invasion of Ukraine, do you think peace is possible? Will Vladimir Putin ever stop?
Yes, when the damage to him and to Russia is visible enough. I do think that he will ruin Russia with this in the long run anyway, but it has to be obvious to him. And that means Ukraine has to be supported with more vigor by Western countries. We can't continue to say we support Ukraine as long as it takes. We have to say we support Ukraine with whatever it takes, and that means delivering more and faster. And the sanctions regime against Russia has to work better, and that means we have to clamp down on circumvention, not necessarily invent new sanctions, but make the ones work that we have, and reduce raw material imports from Russia to EU and NATO member states. And it's a scandal that this is still going on, for example, in Hungary.
When we talk about sanctions or different measures that the EU could take, are they one step behind?
They are one step behind in their functioning. You know, we don't need new sanctions. We need to convince third countries, very often in the global south as it goes, to play along. And that means we have to make them an offer they can't refuse, which means trade, investment, more regular political dialogue, and so on. And that's the way to get to a better functioning sanctions regime.
Europe is currently facing a significant rise, to a certain extent, in countries of the far right, and platforms that are voted in on saying not so much military aid to Ukraine, let's pull out of supporting the war in Ukraine and let them sort it out. What do you make of that? And you've talked about more support with vigour. That's the opposite, isn't it?
Yes, there unfortunately is a growing constituency in Europe of people who want to become a big Switzerland, as it once was expressed in opinion polls in Germany. Now, big Switzerland means have nothing to do with the geopolitical challenges of this world. Ignore the fact that Russia is invading its neighbors and might soon invade NATO countries. Just focus on the here and now and try to get cheap energy wherever it's available. So this is a very short-term, egoistic point of view. By the way, totally ignoring what Switzerland used to be, even in the Cold War. Switzerland was extremely resilient against foreign influence, and it had a very strong army in order to preserve their neutrality. So what I'm saying is that maybe we should stop pointing fingers at national populists saying they're only on the payroll of the Kremlin or repeating Russian propaganda. We should argue why it is so detrimental for our freedom and even prosperity and certainly security to have to permit Russia to win in Ukraine. That has to be explained, not just saying he or she is an agent of the Kremlin. We have to say, if Russia comes away with anything that looks like a victory, we are going to be the next victim of the Kremlin, and we can prove this through the track record of Vladimir Vladimirovich Putin over the last 25 years.
Do you feel like those internal divisions among member states, the fact that the European Union or Europe as a whole isn't saying, yes, Ukraine, whatever it takes, we'll support you, is emboldening Vladimir Putin, but also negatively impacting Europe's standing, I guess, around the world?
Absolutely, Aaron. I mean, let's say on the positive side, the European Union and NATO have been remarkably united since the beginning of the full-scale invasion in 2022. But the cracks in the consensus are widening at the moment. There is a newly growing constituency of governments that are kind of halfway with Ukraine, that are saying that, well, maybe we need to continue our support for the moment, for the time being, but there is a limit, there is an end to our an unquestioning support for Ukraine. That is dangerous. I believe that we need a lot more convincing by the hawkish governments towards their colleagues in other EU and NATO countries, so that we come to a new consensus, so that the cracks start closing again.
Let's talk about some of those cracks, and particularly the cracks in unity across Europe. Here in Budapest and in Hungary, Prime Minister Viktor Orban has made a number of changes around Schengen visa or national card, allowing Belarusians and Russians into the Schengen zone, where then they can effectively go wherever they like. Meanwhile, in Germany, there's now border controls in place all around the circumference of the country. What do you make of those kinds of moves? Two very different moves, but member states acting on their own volition nonetheless.
Indeed. Well, let's take them case by case here and start with the Hungarian one. All we have at the moment is the announcement by the Hungarian government to issue special visas to a whole bunch of countries, among them Belarus and Russia, for workers largely. For example, in the nuclear power station Paks-2. So nobody knows exactly what this simplified visa procedure means. The Hungarian government assures its partners that the rigidity about checking the background of people will be exactly the same. Well, then you don't need a simplified procedure, right? So there are contradictions in the narrative of the Hungarian government. The danger is very simply that GRU and FSB agents posing as workers enter the Schengen space and then are completely unhindered in traveling from Hungary to other places and, for example, committing acts of sabotage, of which we've seen plenty already in this year, clearly initiated or even committed by Russian intelligence services. So that is the Hungarian case. There is a standard procedure that has been decided in the European institutions for some kind of minimal checks that have to be done in case of visa from a whole bunch of countries, including Russia and Belarus. But there's no way there can be an immediate sanction against what the Hungarian government seems to be doing right now. So we need to see how it works out. And indeed, there might be a further weakening of the Schengen zone. And that brings me to the second example that you called out. The German government unilaterally introducing massive and long-lasting border controls with all neighboring countries. With some countries, including Czechia and Poland, these controls or checks, at least spot checks at the border or near the border, have already been enforced for some time. But the German government is clearly driven by electoral defeats of its parties in elections in Eastern Germany. And
often pro-Russian parties.
That's right. And by the way, in opinion polls, also even in Western Germany, these parties don't look very healthy. So one of the main accusations against the governing coalition is that despite promises to get to grips with the problem of uncontrolled illegal immigration, they haven't managed to do so. And what's more, they also pledged to increase the forced repatriation of criminals that were caught in Germany, that come from places like Iraq, Afghanistan, Syria, and so on. And nothing has happened. At first sight, this is a classical German snafu situation, if you permit me, where the federal government is only partly responsible and the Länder governments, the state administrations, have a very strong role to play. So it's a question of competence. Who does what? Who is responsible for what exactly? But the fact is that the federal government now is taking action with these border checks in all directions. And here we have like two principles of the European Union that are clashing with each other. One is the unhindered movement in the Schengen area, and the other one is the so-called Dublin Agreement, Dublin III Agreement, which says that someone who seeks political asylum has to do so in the first country he or she arrives within the European Union, and that happens to be countries like Italy, Greece, or Poland. And then these people cannot travel on to other countries where they might get better social benefits and then ask for political asylum there. That is not the way it's supposed to work. So suddenly, unhindered travel within the European Union starts clashing with an agreement that the member states have made about where asylum seekers have to remain after they first arrive. And unilateral action of the German government has triggered a lot of angry reactions elsewhere, which is understandable. But we need a larger debate about this among the member states. This is nothing that can be solved by Germany now taking back the measures that it started introducing.
And with this weakening of the Schengen zone and this debate that needs to happen, whether in Germany or Hungary, where does that leave us? Because I note Hungary, for example, we're here in Budapest. Prime Minister Viktor Orban currently holds the presidency of the EU Council, and there have been some experts that have said, look, the EU is basically in survival mode until Poland takes over in January. Where does a weakening of the Schengen zone leave us, like I say? And also, is Hungary the EU's weak point at the moment?
Tiny correction, Aaron. Viktor Orban is not the president of the council.
No, is holding.
Hungary as a country.
Forgive me, is holding. Hungary is holding the presidency for the EU Council.
That's right.
At the moment. So for the 6-month period,
right.
Correct.
So Hungary is holding the presidency of the council. That means it is chairing the meetings of ministers, correct, for example. I think there has been a tremendous pushback against the first couple of actions that Viktor Orban took when Hungary took over the presidency of the Council. The so-called peace initiative, this trip around the world, Russia, China, Turkey, and then a meeting with Trump. This has not gone down well with the other member states, and they are making their attitude clear by a soft boycott of many meetings where there's supposed to be a ministerial meeting, and then it ends up just a meeting of high-ranking bureaucrats, not the ministers. And that's the reaction for the moment. There's very little other member states can concretely and quickly do about it. But my thesis is that Orban's colleagues among the heads of government in the European Union need to be even clearer in telling him that there are ways to push back against Hungary's rhetoric, the Hungarian government's rhetoric and its actions. And these are maybe unconventional ways. This is not formally through the institutions of the European Union, but this will affect economic, cultural, technological, and other forms of cooperation between other member states and Hungary.
So lastly then, we talk about a weakened Schengen zone. We talk about Hungary holding the EU presidency for the 6 months, but not really being taken seriously by the EU because of Viktor Orban's actions. And of course, all the other issues that the EU faces. How critical will Poland taking over the EU presidency for 6 months from January, how critical will that period be to actually get some tangible work done and indeed support the region that is facing so many challenges?
I think one shouldn't overestimate the role and the strength of a presidency of the European Council. This is you can basically put the coffee cups on the table, and you, to a certain extent, control the agenda. But there's no such thing as the country having the presidency ruling the European Union or anything. So, having said that, you can say
it's important nonetheless.
It is symbolically important, yes. And I think the Polish presidency of the Council has a tremendous potential to make up for the shortcomings of the Hungarian one. And Donald Tusk as a person is in a pivotal position, because Germany and France are each in their own way paralyzed when it comes to a robust, forward-looking foreign and security policy. And the next in line, so to speak, is Donald Tusk from Poland. And he has a tremendous role to play in the Council and in European politics in general. There are two other personnel facts of recent months that play into the same direction, and that is, of course, the reappointment of Ursula von der Leyen as Commission President. She totally has the heart in the right place when it comes to Ukraine, when it comes to European security and defense policy, and when it comes to the right balance between strong European institutions and strong member states. And the other great news is Kaja Kallas as the High Representative and Vice President for Foreign Policy. These three persons, Kallas, von der Leyen and Tusk, will carry forward Europe's effort to push back against Russia's aggression. That's my prediction.
A critical time indeed. Roland Freudenstein, Director at the Free Russia Foundation Office in Brussels. Thank you again for your time.
Pleasure.
And thank you for joining us here on TVP World. Do stay with us. I'm Aaron Darman. Goodbye for now.